The broken warrior. The battlefield was silent, covered in smoke and the smell of fire. The war between the alien clan called the Seven and their enemies had ended hours ago, but the land was still bleeding. Bodies of soldiers lay in the mud, weapons broken, banners burned. Among them was a warrior of the Seven, her armor cracked, her body weak, her spirit almost gone. Her name was not spoken by her clan anymore. They called her Broken. Her right arm did not move as it once did, her legs trembled when she tried to stand. The Seven looked at her with cold eyes, not with pity but with judgment. To them, a warrior who could not fight was useless. They left her there, turning their backs as if she had never existed. "Leave her," one of them said. "She is nothing now." Their voices faded as they walked away, and she lay in the dirt, alone. The warrior closed her eyes, her chest rising slowly. Perhaps it was better to die here than live as discarded flesh. She thought of the times when she had fought beside her clan, when her blade was sharp and her honor was strong, but those memories only cut deeper now, for they reminded her of what she had lost. It was then that footsteps echoed near her, not heavy alien boots, but something lighter, different. She opened her eyes and saw him, a human soldier, moving carefully across the broken ground. He carried a rifle, but his eyes were not filled with hate. They were searching, cautious, but when they landed on her, they did not harden, they softened. The human stopped a few steps away. Staring at the figure in the dirt, he could see her broken armor, the strange marks of her species, the way her body shook. Any other human might have walked past or even raised a weapon to end her life. But this one stood still, thinking. She met his gaze, her voice rough and faint. "Leave me," she whispered. "I am broken." The words hurt her as she said them, but they were true in her mind. The human tilted his head as if trying to understand. Then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice steady. "You are not broken." She blinked, not sure if she had heard correctly. No one had spoken to her like that. Not since before her fall. The human knelt beside her, ignoring the danger of being so close. He set his weapon aside and reached out a hand. "Can you stand?" he asked, his tone calm. She tried, but her legs failed her and she fell back into the dirt. Her breath came sharp and uneven. The human did not pull away. Instead, he lifted her with care as if she weighed nothing. He slung her arm across his shoulder, supporting her broken body with his own. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why help me? I am your enemy." The human gave a small smile, though his eyes remained serious. "Because no one deserves to be left behind," he said. Simple words, but they struck her heart harder than any blade. The human carried her across the battlefield. Step by step behind them, smoke rose from burning ships, and far away the cries of soldiers still echoed. But in that small space, it was only them, the human and the alien, who had been cast aside. Every movement hurt her, and she wanted to tell him again to leave her, but his grip was firm, his pace steady. He did not speak much, yet his silence was stronger than words. He had made his choice and nothing would change it. As they moved through the ruins, she began to see him differently, not as an enemy soldier, not as a stranger, but as someone who carried something her own people had forgotten: loyalty. Her chest ached, not from her wounds, but from the strange hope rising inside her. Perhaps she was not as broken as they had said. Perhaps her worth was not measured by the strength of her body, but by the fact that someone still believed in her. The night grew colder, the shadows deeper. The human found a ruined shelter, half walls and broken metal beams. He lowered her gently against the wall and searched for dry cloth. She watched him silently, her eyes heavy with pain but filled with questions. He tore a piece of his own uniform to bandage her wounds. Every touch was careful, not as a captor but as a guardian. It confused her, it shook her, but it also warmed her. As the fire he lit began to glow, she whispered again, "Why me?" The human looked into the flames, his face lined with exhaustion but also with resolve. "Because I choose you," he said simply. And in that moment, for the first time since her clan had turned away, she felt seen. The battlefield outside was still dangerous. Enemies still hunted, but inside that ruined shelter, something new began, something fragile yet powerful. A bond between a human and a so-called broken warrior. And though neither knew what tomorrow would bring, one truth was clear. He had chosen her, when no one else would. The choice. The night was long, filled with the crackle of a small fire and the whisper of the cold wind. The human sat awake, his rifle across his lap, guarding the broken shelter where the alien warrior rested. She slept lightly, her body weak, but her mind never fully at peace. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow reminded her of betrayal. She had once trusted the seven with her life, and they had cast her aside like useless scrap. When dawn touched the ruined land, the human checked her bandages. His hands were rough but careful, the way of a soldier who had seen too much but refused to lose his humanity. She opened her eyes, staring at him in silence. It was strange. No human had ever looked at her with such patience. Her own clan had called her weak, yet this human treated her as if her life mattered. "Why stay?" she asked at last, her voice dry. "You could leave, go back to your people. No one would know." The human gave a short laugh. Not cruel, but honest. "I would know," he said. "And that is enough." The words hung in the air. Heavier than any weapon, she did not understand him. Yet part of her wanted to. He was different from the seven, different from the commanders who saw soldiers as tools. This human chose with his heart, not just orders. They moved again when the sun rose higher. The human guided her through the broken ruins. Step by step, sometimes she leaned on him. Sometimes he carried her outright. Enemy scouts prowled the land, their banners like black knives against the smoke. The human led her away from open paths. Choosing hidden trails, every choice was dangerous, but his eyes never wavered. At one point, they stopped in an old trench. The air was thick with dust, and silence pressed down on them from above. They heard voices, enemy patrols searching. The human pressed a finger to his lips, his other hand gripping his weapon tight. The alien warrior held her breath, her heart pounding. If the patrol found them, both would die. Her clan would not care. But the human would die because of her weakness. The thought burned in her chest, sharper than her wounds. When the danger passed, she spoke again, her voice low. "You risk too much for me." The human looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "You are not a risk," he said. "You are a choice." The word echoed in her mind. Choice. The seven had never given her a choice. They had judged and abandoned, but this human had decided, and he did not regret it. As they walked, her memory returned in pieces. She remembered the day she was branded broken. It was not because she had failed in battle, but because she had chosen mercy. There had been civilians trapped in the crossfire. She had defied her commander's order to burn them all. She had protected the weak, and for that, her clan had called her unworthy. The memory hurt, but now, with this human beside her, it felt different. Perhaps mercy was not weakness, perhaps it was strength. That night, they reached the edge of a ruined forest. The trees were burned black, their branches clawing at the red sky. The human built another small fire, his hand steady even though his body shook with exhaustion. She watched him work, wondering how he kept going. He had no reason to fight for her, yet he did. His loyalty was not forced. "It was chosen, your people," she asked. "Would they accept me? A broken alien?" The human stared into the flames, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I don't know." He turned to her then, his gaze firm. "But I accept you. And that is enough for now." She felt her throat tighten, her eyes burning with something she had not felt in years. Not pain, not anger, but hope. A dangerous feeling, yet one she could not stop. Perhaps she was not broken, not truly. Perhaps she only needed someone to believe. The forest was alive with distant noises, enemy hunters searching the night. The human leaned against the wall of the ruined shelter. His rifle close, she lay near the fire, her body weak but her spirit stirring. She thought of his words, choice, loyalty, hope, and for the first time since she was cast aside, she whispered a promise to herself. If she lived, she would stand again, not just for herself but for the human who chose her. The night stretched on, but the silence between them was not empty. It was filled with something new, something fragile yet strong. And as the flames flickered against their faces, the alien warrior realized that her story was not over. It was only beginning. Shadows of betrayal. The dawn was cold, and mist rolled across the ruined forest like a living ghost. The human rose first, checking his weapon and listening for sounds of danger. The alien warrior stirred slowly, her wound still sharp, her body still weak. Yet there was something different in her eyes now, a faint spark where there had only been emptiness. They moved together through the forest, their steps slow but steady. The human guided her over broken roots and shattered stone. Every time she stumbled, he caught her before she fell. His patience seemed endless, and it made her chest tighten with a strange feeling she did not understand. But inside her, shadows stirred, memories she could not escape. As they rested near the burned trunk of a fallen tree, her voice trembled when she spoke. "You wonder why they called me broken," she said. Her gaze fixed on the ground. The human looked at her. Waiting without pushing, she continued, "It was not my wounds, not my scars, it was my choice." Her mind pulled her back to the day it happened. She remembered the village, flames rising as the seven marched in. Her commander ordered the destruction of everything, no matter who lived there. But she had seen the children, frightened, hiding in the shadows of broken homes. Her heart had burned hotter than her weapon. She had lowered her blade, stood between the innocents and her own commander. "You are weak," he had told her, his voice like ice. "You shamed the seven." Her hands shook as she recalled the moment. She had been beaten, stripped of rank, cast out before the eyes of her kin. They had called her useless, dishonored, broken. Her scars were not only on her body, but deep within her spirit the human listened in silence, his face unreadable when she finished. She waited for his judgment. Would he call her weak too? Would he say she deserved her fate? Instead, he spoke softly, his words steady. "You chose mercy," he said. "That is not weakness. That is strength." The alien warrior lifted her eyes. Shocked, no one had ever said those words to her before. Her clan had punished her for it, her enemies had mocked her. Yet this human who owed her nothing saw her act as noble. A warmth spread through her chest, fragile yet powerful. But the moment of peace did not last. Voices carried through the forest. Enemy hunters. Searching, the human signaled for silence, pulling her into the shadows of the broken tree. They crouched low as armored figures passed nearby, their weapons gleaming in the pale light. The alien warrior held her breath, her heart hammering like a drum. If they were found, the human would die because of her, and the thought tore at her soul. One of the hunters paused, tilting his head for a breathless moment. It seemed they were discovered. The human's hand tightened on his weapon, ready to fight even against impossible odds, but the hunter turned away, following the others deeper into the forest. The danger passed, leaving silence behind. The alien warrior's knees gave out, and she sank against the tree, trembling. "You should not stay with me," she whispered. "I am a burden." "They will kill you for protecting me." The human crouched beside her, his gaze steady. "You are not a burden," he said. "You are worth fighting for." His voice was not loud, but it carried more strength than a battle cry. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned. She wanted to believe him, but doubt still haunted her. The betrayal of the seven was a wound deeper than any blade. Could she truly rise again? Could she trust another? That night they found shelter in the remains of an old bunker. The human lit a small fire and shared what little food he had. She sat close, watching the flames, her mind heavy with questions. The warmth of the fire touched her scars, but the warmth of his words touched her soul as she drifted into uneasy sleep. Her dreams twisted with shadows of betrayal and flashes of hope. In one dream she saw the seven turning their backs, their voices cold, but then, in the same vision, she saw the human standing firm, refusing to leave. The contrast burned into her heart. Perhaps one human could do what an entire clan could not, see her as more than broken. The forest outside whispered with danger. Hunters moved in the night, but inside that bunker, the alien warrior felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not safety, not yet, but the beginning of trust. And trust, she realized, could be the seed of strength. Tomorrow would bring new dangers. But tonight, she whispered to herself, "I am not broken, not anymore." And as the human sat watch, his rifle steady and his eyes sharp, she believed him, if only for a moment. The hunter's snare. The night gave way to a heavy morning sky, clouds rolling dark above the ruined forest. The human guided the alien warrior through the shadows, always searching, always listening. Her steps were steadier now, though her strength was still fragile. Every breath reminded her of the wounds she carried, but every step beside him reminded her of something new. Hope. They walked carefully until they reached an old outpost, half buried under vines and stone. It looked abandoned, but the human's eyes narrowed, his soldier's instinct warning him. He motioned for silence, raising a hand, and she froze beside him for a moment. The forest seemed too quiet, as if holding its breath. Then it came, the sharp snap of a branch, the glint of metal in the mist. Enemy hunters emerged from the shadows, their armor painted black, their eyes cold and merciless. The trap had been waiting, a snare designed to catch the wounded and the desperate. The human pulled her behind the broken wall of the outpost, rifle raised, his body tense like a drawn bow. The hunters closed in, their voices harsh. "Two survivors! Corner them," one of them growled. The alien warrior felt her chest tighten, fear clawing at her. She was weak. She could not fight. She would only drag him down. "Leave me," she whispered urgently. "Run while you can. Save yourself." But the human turned his head sharply, his eyes blazing with fire. "No," he said, firm as stone. "I told you you are not alone." The words struck her harder than the hunter's weapons. In that instant she understood. He had chosen this path, and nothing could make him abandon it. The first hunter fired, and the air cracked with burning light. The human moved swiftly, dragging her deeper into cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Bullets and beams tore through the ruins, shattering stone and kicking up dust. The alien warrior crouched low, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She wanted to fight, but her body refused. Her strength betrayed her again. Still, she could not just watch. Her eyes scanned the ground and found a fallen blade. Cracked but sharp enough, with trembling hands she picked it up, gripping it until her knuckles ached. The hunters pressed closer, their footsteps heavy, their shadows stretching long across the ruins. The human fought like a storm, moving fast, firing without hesitation. But even he could not hold forever. A blast tore through the wall near him, throwing him back with a grunt of pain. The alien warrior cried out, fear tearing through her chest. She crawled to him, dragging his body into cover. Blood stained his arm, but his eyes still burned with determination. "They want me," she whispered. "If you leave me—" "They will stop," the human shook his head. His jaw set. "They will never stop," he said. "So we fight," the hunters advanced, their weapons ready, their laughter cruel. The alien warrior felt the weight of her blade, her hands trembling less now. She thought of the children she had once protected, the choice that had branded her broken. She thought of the human who refused to abandon her, and something inside her shifted. When the hunters closed in, she rose, her body screaming with pain but her spirit blazing. She moved with the blade, clumsy yet fierce, striking at the nearest attacker. The hunter staggered back, surprised by the strength of someone they thought useless. The human used the opening, firing shot after shot until another fell. For a moment, the tide turned. The battle raged across the ruins, dust and fire filling the air. The alien warrior stumbled, struck, bled, but she did not fall. The human fought beside her, every movement protecting her, every shot pushing back the hunters. Together, they carved a path through the snare step by step until at last, the remaining hunters fled into the forest, leaving silence behind. The alien warrior dropped the blade, her body trembling. Her knees gave out, but the human caught her before she fell. His chest rose and fell heavily, his face pale with exhaustion. But when their eyes met, he smiled faintly. "You see," he said between breaths, "you are not broken." Her throat tightened, her eyes burned. For the first time since her clan abandoned her, she felt like a warrior again. Not because of her strength, but because of her choice to stand. She had chosen to fight, and the human had chosen her. The ruined outpost was quiet once more, the snare broken, but both knew this was only the beginning. The hunters would return, stronger, hungrier, and the path ahead would demand more than strength. It would demand trust. As the human leaned against the wall, holding his bleeding arm, she placed her hand over his. "I will not be left behind again," she whispered, her voice steady, and for the first time she believed it. Sparks of strength. The forest was quiet again, but the silence was heavy, filled with the weight of what had just happened. The human sat against the broken wall of the outpost, blood staining his sleeve, his breath uneven. The alien warrior crouched beside him, her body trembling but her spirit burning brighter than before. She had stood, she had fought, and for the first time since her exile, she no longer felt like the weak one left behind. Her hands shook as she tied cloth around his wound. Her fingers clumsy but determined. The human winced, but he said nothing. His eyes calm, his jaw tight. She looked at him, wondering how he could endure so much pain with so little complaint. He had carried her, fought for her, and now bled for her. It stirred something inside her, something she had thought long dead. A spark of strength, fragile but real. "We need to move," the human said, his voice rough but steady. "They will come back." She wanted to tell him to rest, to save his strength, But she knew he was right. The hunters never gave up, and the ruins were no longer safe, so she rose, offering him her arm. This time it was she who carried part of his weight. Step by step they left the broken outpost behind. The forest stretched before them, burned and twisted. Yet alive with hidden dangers, they walked slowly, every sound making them tense, every shadow making them ready. The human leaned on her more than before, yet he never let his guard drop. The alien warrior kept her blade close, the cracked weapon that had given her back her will to fight. As the day wore on, the ache in her body grew. Her scars burned, her legs trembled, but she did not stop. She thought of the seven, of how they had turned their backs so easily. They had called her broken because she chose mercy. But now, with this human beside her, she began to see her choice differently. Mercy had not destroyed her, it had saved her. And perhaps it would save him too by nightfall. They found a small cave hidden by stone and vines. The human set his rifle by the entrance and sank against the wall. His face pale, she knelt beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Fear pressed down on her, not of the enemy, but of losing him if he fell, if he left her. She would be alone once more. And that thought terrified her more than any battlefield. She lit a small fire, her hands clumsy but steady. The flames flickered across the walls, chasing away the darkness. The human opened his eyes slowly, watching her. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. His voice faint. The words struck her again. Not as praise, but as truth. She sat beside him in silence. Her mind restless, her clan had called her weak, had cast her aside, but this human, even bleeding, even broken himself, still believed in her. And little by little, she began to believe too. The next morning, the human could barely stand. So the alien warrior took the lead, guiding him through the forest. Her blade was ready, her eyes sharp, her body aching but unwilling to give in. Every step she took was a promise that she would not fail him, that she would not be broken again. They reached a ridge overlooking the valley. Smoke rose in the distance where enemy camps burned their fires. The human studied the view, his eyes calculating. "We'll need to pass through there," he said. "No other way back." The alien warrior tightened her grip on the blade. Her heart beat fast, but it was not fear this time, it was resolve. They descended slowly, keeping to the shadows. The valley was alive with patrols, hunters moving in pairs. At one point, they had to crawl through mud, hiding from a group that marched past. The human's breath came harsh and heavy, but he did not stop. She glanced at him, and for the first time she whispered, "Lean on me." He gave her a faint smile and did as she asked. It was a small thing, but it filled her with pride by night. They reached the far edge of the valley, their bodies filthy and worn. The alien warrior set her back against a stone, her chest rising and falling fast. The human leaned beside her, his voice low. "You saved me today," he said. She blinked at him, confused. "I only helped you walk," she replied. But he shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "You carried more than my weight, you carried hope." Her throat tightened, her heart aching with something she could not name. She turned away, staring at the stars breaking through the smoke above. For years she had thought herself empty, discarded, broken. But tonight, sitting beside him, she felt something else. She felt whole. The hunters were still out there, danger was still near. But the alien warrior no longer feared the road ahead, for every step was no longer a burden. It was proof that she could stand, proof that she could fight, and most of all, proof that she was not broken anymore. The stand, the valley behind them, was a shadow, and the mountains ahead rose like jagged teeth. The human leaned heavier on his rifle now, his body slower, his face pale. The alien warrior walked close beside him, her blade in hand, her eyes scanning the dark ridges. They had made it far, farther than she thought possible. But fate was not done with them yet. By midday, they reached a ruined outpost at the base of the mountains. The walls were shattered, the towers broken, yet the air carried the smell of old battles. The human paused, his jaw tight, his soldier's sense warning him again. And then the sound came, the clatter of boots, the heavy growl of voices. The hunters had returned. They emerged from the shadows, armored and armed, their eyes gleaming with hunger. This time there were more, twice as many as before, their weapons ready, their orders clear. The alien warrior felt her chest tighten, fear gripping her. The human lifted his rifle. Planting his feet on the broken ground, he did not move, did not flinch. "Though he knew the numbers against him, we cannot win," she whispered. Her voice cracking, the human looked at her. His eyes fierce despite his wounds. "Then we stand," he said, his words sharp as steel. Something inside her shifted. The same spark from before now blazing like fire. If he would stand, then so would she. No matter the cost, the hunters surged forward, their weapons blazing. The human fired shot after shot, each one precise, each one desperate. The alien warrior charged with her cracked blade, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. She struck, blocked, stumbled, rose again, pain seared through her wounds. But she refused to fall. The ruins shook with the battle, dust falling from broken walls. The human shouted warnings, covering her with his fire. She moved faster than she thought possible, her body answering the fire in her heart. The hunters were stronger, sharper, but they did not expect her to rise. They had called her broken, useless, discarded, but tonight, she stood like a storm reborn. One hunter swung heavy, his blade slicing air. She ducked low, driving her weapon into his chest. Another closed in, but the human's rifle cracked, dropping him in a burst of light. Together they moved, a rhythm of fire and steel, a dance of survival. The ruins burned with sound and fury, but still they stood. Her arms trembled, her vision blurred. Yet she fought on. Every strike, every breath was no longer for herself alone, it was for him, the human who chose her when all others turned away. It was for the promise she had whispered, to never be left behind again. But the hunters pressed harder, their numbers heavy. The human staggered, his rifle clicking empty. He drew a blade of his own, standing shoulder to shoulder with her. They faced the hunters together, two against many. The alien warrior felt strength rise inside her, not from her body, but from her will. The battle reached its breaking point. The hunters circled, their laughter cruel, certain of their victory. But the human's voice cut through the chaos, steady as ever. "They think you're broken," he said, his eyes never leaving the enemy. "They're wrong. Show them." Her heart roared with fire, her blade flashed. She struck with a cry that shook the ruins, driving back the hunters with raw defiance. Her body screamed with pain, but her spirit screamed louder. The hunters faltered, stunned by the force of someone they had left for dead. The human followed, his blade moving in fierce arcs. Together they pushed step by step, turning despair into fury. One by one the hunters fell, their numbers breaking, until at last only silence remained, broken only by the ragged sound of their breaths. The alien warrior collapsed to her knees, her blade slipping from her hands. The human dropped beside her, his chest rising and falling heavy. They were covered in blood, dust and scars, but they were alive. For a long moment neither spoke. The ruins around them were shattered. But in the silence, victory lived. Finally, the human laughed softly, tired but proud. "You stood," he said, his voice rough but warm. Her eyes filled with tears she could not hold back. "I was broken," she whispered. "But with you, I stood again." The fire inside her had changed. No longer a fragile spark, it was a flame, steady and strong. The hunters would return, dangers would come, but she was no longer the abandoned one. She was not broken anymore. And as the stars broke through the smoke above, the human rested his hand on her shoulder. For the first time, she believed that together they could survive anything. For the first time, she believed in herself. Chose and the ruins were silent after the battle, the ground littered with broken weapons and fallen hunters. The human and the alien warrior sat together in the rubble, their bodies trembling, their breaths heavy. Neither spoke for a long time. Their silence was not empty but full of exhaustion, full of victory, and full of something new. The alien warrior touched her cracked blade, the weapon that had carried her through one last storm. Her hands were stained with blood, but her spirit was not the same as before. She remembered lying in the dirt, abandoned by her clan, waiting for death. She remembered his hand lifting her, his voice saying she was not broken. Now after all this, she believed it. The human leaned back against a wall, his face pale but his eyes alive. He looked at her, and there was no pity in his gaze, only respect. "You stood when it mattered," he said, his voice low. "You were never broken, only betrayed." Her throat tightened. His words cut deeper than any blade, but healed deeper too. She had spent so long believing the lie of her people, the lie that scars meant weakness, that mercy meant failure. But this human had chosen her when no one else would. He had carried her through fire and darkness, and together they had survived as night fell. The stars stretched wide above them, The alien warrior gazed at the sky, her eyes catching the glimmer of constellations. She thought of the seven, far away now, who had cast her aside. Perhaps they still laughed, still scorned her name, but it no longer mattered. For here she had found something they could never give her. Other survivors began to arrive in the valley, drawn by the smoke and the sound of battle, humans and aliens alike. Soldiers who had been scattered and broken by the war. They stopped when they saw her standing, the one who had been abandoned, the one they thought lost. Whispers spread among them, voices carrying disbelief and awe. "Is that her?" Some asked. "The broken one?" "She still lives," others said. She fought. The human rose slowly, though his body ached with pain. He placed his hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "She was never broken," he declared to those who watched, his voice cutting through the whispers. "She was only cast aside, and I chose her." The words struck like lightning, silencing the crowd. The alien warrior felt her chest rise, her heart pounding. For so long she had been hidden in the shadow of shame, but now the truth was revealed under the open stars. She was not weak, she was not discarded, she was chosen. The survivors looked at her differently now, not with pity, not with contempt, but with respect. Even those who had once turned their backs could not deny what they saw. A warrior scarred but standing. A warrior broken in body yet unbroken in spirit. The night grew colder, but she no longer felt the chill. The fire inside her burned brighter than ever. The human sat beside her, his presence steady, his choice unwavering. He had not saved her out of duty. He had not fought for her out of command. He had done it because he chose her, and that choice had given her life again. She turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "You carried me when I could not walk," she said. "You believed when I did not believe in myself." The human gave a faint smile, his eyes weary but warm. "And now you stand," he replied. "That is all I wanted." Silence stretched between them, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of trust, of understanding, of a bond forged in fire around them. Whispers spread further, stories already taking shape. The tale of the broken warrior who rose again. The tale of the human who chose when all others refused. The alien warrior lifted her blade, cracked but unyielding, and raised it toward the stars. "I will not be left behind again," she said, her voice carrying strong into the night. And those who heard her believed in her, believed in the choice that had changed everything. The war was not over, the dangers were not gone, but the human and the alien warrior stood side by side. No longer alone, she had been cast aside by the seven, but now she had been chosen by one, and sometimes one was greater than all.